April 1976 in North America presents a concentrated period of deep societal contradiction. We can analyze this month as a macro-historical node, a highly compressed window of time where distinct, competing historical eras physically overlap. The primary tension of this specific era produced 1776-1976 bicentennial logo, and on the right, a greeny, hand-soldered computer circuit board. The dominant mainstream culture was entirely consumed by the first image, completely missing the emergent signals of the second. To understand how a society can be blind to its own future, we will peel back the layers of this single 30-day window. We will treat the pop culture artifacts and consumer goods of April 1976 not as nostalgic trivia, but as hard sociological data. By examining this data, we can systematically map the exact boundary line separating industrial-era inertia from the incoming digital framework. Isolating this specific temporal window demonstrates that massive structural changes incubate directly beneath the dominant cultural narratives of the day. In the United States, the bicentennial operated as a nationwide exercise in aggressive commercial retrospection. Look at this photograph outside the National Archives. This dense crowd under heavy bicentennial banners illustrates consumerism enforcing a comforting historical narrative across the public. This financial artifact perfectly captures that backward-looking posture, the reissued Jefferson $2 bill. The public stripped this currency of its actual economic utility, choosing instead to hoard it in desk drawers as a physical souvenir of a fading era. This cultural fixation on the past was echoed with the April 5th death of Howard Hughes, the archetypal reclusive industrialist who had spent decades retreating from a world he helped build. His passing mid-flight closed a specific chapter of eccentric, early 20th century industrial capitalism. Yet just across the northern border, Canada was executing a complementary but sharply contrasting geopolitical strategy. In preparation for the Summer Olympics, Montreal was undergoing frantic, high-cost infrastructure development. Canada utilized these massive infrastructure costs to calculate its structural integration into the global economy. This photograph of Pierre Trudeau deep in diplomatic conversation represents the climax of that strategy. Driven by this international expansion, Canada ascended to the Group of Six, officially forming the G7. The geopolitical paths had cleanly diverged. The United States retreated into domestic historical comfort, while Canada accelerated its outward global integration. To accurately measure the societal anxieties driving this retreat, we have to look at the screen media of the era. Primetime television programming relied almost entirely on sanitized, highly nostalgic depictions of the mid-century. This visual of a typical 1970s living room, complete with gold shag carpet, establishes the exact physical environment where this domestic cocooning took place. This broadcast nostalgia provided the public with a psychological buffer against real-world economic and political instability. But if you stepped out of the living room and into a movie theater, that profound safety was replaced by an emergent institutional distrust. This image of two men in a cluttered newsroom represents the gritty realism of All the President's Men, which opened that April. The film successfully took the deep political cynicism of the Watergate investigation and commodified it into a mainstream cinematic thriller. That same irreverence infiltrated even family-oriented genres. Look at this youth baseball team huddling on a dirt field. The Bad News Bears bypassed wholesome moral lessons entirely, delivering a realistic, unpolished, and distinctly anti-authoritarian portrayal of American youth. Audience consumption split cleanly down the middle, a desperate desire for a sanitized past at home, and a brutal appetite for contemporary institutional distrust in the cinema. This cultural bifurcation was not limited to screens. It mapped perfectly onto the audio landscape of April 1976. The established musical status quo of the mid-70s was defined by highly polished, corporatized stadium rock. This photograph captures Peter Frampton performing live, perfectly embodying the acoustic inertia of the era. His multi-platinum live album dominated the charts, representing a perfected, safe, and highly lucrative iteration of late 60s counterculture. Then, on exactly April 23rd, a definitive sonic rupture occurred. Here we see four members of the Ramones standing against a brick wall. Their self-titled debut album arrived as a hostile, direct rejection of the dominant musical framework. Their stripped-down, aggressive tempo functioned as a deliberate mechanical dismantling of stadium rock's bloated complexity. This underground release exposed the physical limits of the established music industry's business model, signaling its impending obsolescence. The broader culture was inadvertently incubating the exact sonic movement destined to destroy its commercial dominance. Yet, the most consequential historical variable to emerge in April 1976 went completely ignored by the public. Look at this archival photograph of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. On April 1st, they legally incorporated Apple Computer in California. The project operated as a localized hobbyist endeavor, entirely detached from the era's traditional corporate structures. The physical output of this new entity was crude. This visual shows the exposed Apple I circuit board, keyboard, and monitor assembly, a stark contrast to the era's polished consumer goods. This raw, unhoused hardware serves as the exact archaeological seed of the digital age. The deafening public celebrations of the bicentennial completely drowned out the silence of this technological genesis. The critical variables destined to rewrite human history often incubate entirely outside the awareness of the dominant mainstream culture. When we aggregate the cultural, geopolitical, and technological data points of April 1976, a clear, cohesive model of transition emerges. This single month operates as the measurable boundary line between industrial-era tradition and the digital future. This timeline maps these variables. We see Apple's founding, Howard Hughes' death, the Ramones' release, and bicentennial prep overlapping within a 30-day window. The inertia of traditional institutions and the disruption of future technologies occupied the exact same calendar space. The historical evidence demonstrates that significant historical shifts frequently occurred directly beneath the noise of dominant, backward-looking cultural narratives. The true impact of this specific month only became legible in retrospect, a full decade later. This analysis was brought to you by Stalls or Circle. Thank you for watching. Consider what silent variables are incubating directly beneath our own dominant cultural narratives today.